Iranian Foreign Minister says U.S. talks in Oman a good beginning.
Senior U.S. and Iranian officials have held talks in Oman amid a crisis that has raised fears of a military confrontation between the two countries. The indirect discussions in the capital Muscat happened as the U.S. military builds up its presence in the Middle East in response to Iran's violent repression of nationwide anti-government protests last month, which human rights groups say killed many thousands of people. Speaking on state television after the talks, Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi said negotiators would return to their capitals for consultations, but described the meeting as a good beginning.
Iran had previously said the talks would be limited to its nuclear program.
The U.S., which is demanding Iran freezes its nuclear program and discards its stockpile of enriched uranium, had said they should also involve Iran's ballistic missiles and the country's support for regional armed groups. Earlier, Oman said its foreign minister had held separate talks with Araghchi, and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law and emissary Jared Kushner. It said the consultations focused on preparing the appropriate conditions for resuming diplomatic and technical negotiations. The last round of talks between the U.S. and Iran over the Iranian nuclear program had been scheduled for last June but collapsed after Israel's surprise attack on Iran. In recent weeks, Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if it does not reach a deal. The U.S. has sent thousands of troops and what Trump has described as an armada to the region, including an aircraft carrier along with other warships as well as fighter jets. Iran has vowed to respond to an attack with force, threatening to strike American military assets in the Middle East and Israel. For Iran's embattled leaders, the talks could be the last chance to avert U.S. military action that could further destabilize the regime, which analysts say is in its weakest position since it came to power following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Trump's threats came as Iran's security forces brutally repressed large-scale demonstrations, which were triggered by a deepening economic crisis, and saw protesters calling for the end of the Islamic Republic. The human rights activists' news agency, a Washington-based group, said it had confirmed at least 6,883 deaths, warning that the number could be much higher, and that more than 50,000 people had been arrested. The current crisis has brought back to discussions the issue of Iran's nuclear program, which has been at the center of a long-running dispute with the West. For decades, Iran has said its program is for peaceful purposes, while the U.S. and Israel have accused it of being part of an effort to develop a weapon. Iran says it has the right to enrich uranium in its own territory and has rejected calls for its stockpile of highly enriched uranium 400 kilograms 880 pounds to be transferred to a third country. The country says its uranium enrichment activity stopped after the U.S. attacks last year. Officials have indicated being open to concessions, which could include the creation of a regional consortium for uranium enrichment, as proposed during talks with the U.S. that collapsed when Israel launched its surprise war last year. At the same time, Iran says demands to limit the country's ballistic missile program and to end the support for proxies in the region and alliance Tehran calls the axis of resistance that includes Hamas in Gaza, militias in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen are unacceptable and a breach of its sovereignty. On Tuesday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said he had instructed Araghchi to pursue fair and equitable negotiations with the U.S., provided that a suitable environment exists. For the U.S., the meeting, depending on its outcome, could offer an off-ramp for Trump from his military threats.
Regional countries are concerned that a U.S. strike could lead to a wider